I just faced a father's worst fear. An HOA bully slapped my daughter at lunch, and his mother posted a fake video online to pin vandalism on her. And her excuse? She said, "Boys will be boys, but girls must be held accountable." What they didn't know was that I would do anything to protect my daughter, and I was going to be sure I made them pay. But let me start at the beginning. Before we dive in, let me know where you're listening from today. Lunch was loud. Then a hand cracked across my daughter's face, and the room froze. Phone's up. Her name's Tiffany. I'm Jim Bowman. 30 seconds later, the HOA prince was crying on the floor. By sundown, his parents were next. It was my daughter Tiffany's first day at her new high school. She's 16, sharp as a tack, with a tongue that could cut glass. She gets her sarcasm from me, but she weaponizes it in a way I never could. She's got this unnerving calm under pressure, like a bomb disposal expert who finds the whole thing a little bit boring. We'd heard whispers about the Abernathys. Richard Abernathy was the HOA president, a man who walked around like he was the king of a very small, very beige kingdom. His son, Chad, was apparently the prince. A chip off the old block, but with none of the polish. Just a loud, entitled kid who mistook fear for respect. Tiffany, of course, had him sized up in about 5 seconds. The confrontation happened in the cafeteria during lunch. According to the half-dozen kids who called Tiffany a hero later, Chad was harassing a younger student, trying to take his lunch money like some villain from an 80s movie. Tiffany was a few tables away. She didn't shout. She didn't make a scene. She just said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear, "Wow." I haven't seen a shakedown that clumsy since my dad tried to assemble IKEA furniture. The table erupted in snickers. Chad's face went beet red. He wasn't used to being laughed at. He stomped over to her table, his 2 little cronies trailing behind him like pilot fish. He got right in her face, puffing out his chest. "You think you're funny, new girl?" Tiffany took a slow, deliberate bite of her apple. She chewed, swallowed, and then looked him dead in the eye. "Funnier than you, apparently. And I get the feeling that's a pretty low bar." Chad blinked, gears grinding. "You think you're clever?" Tiffany took another bite of her apple. "I think you're loud." One of his cronies snickered. Chad shot him a look. "Stand up," he ordered. "I am standing," Tiffany said, deadpan. "On self-respect. You should try it." A teacher hissed, "Enough!" Chad's jaw worked. The slap came fast, sloppy. Gasps, trays rattled. Tiffany turned back slow, eyes like winter. "Nice swing. Cameras love angles." The vice principal pushed through the crowd. "Office. Now." Chad pointed at Tiffany. "She—" "Save it," she said, already writing a pink slip. "You just handed me the short version. Beat made." We got the call an hour later. I left work immediately, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. All I could think about was protecting my kid. When I got to the school, Dana was already there, calm as a statue, taking notes in a little black book she always carries. Tiffany was sitting with her, looking more annoyed than upset. The school's response was pathetic. They called it a peer-to-peer disagreement. Chad got a 3-day suspension, 3 days for striking my daughter. I wanted to explode, but Dana put a hand on my arm. "Not here," she whispered. "We handle this our way." We took Tiffany home. I asked her if she was okay. She just rolled her eyes. "Dad, I'm fine." The slap didn't even hurt. What's annoying is that he's not even a creative bully. It was so cliché. That's my girl, jokes under pressure. At dinner, the spaghetti steamed like a fog machine. Dana clicked her pen. "Timeline. Slap at 12:08. VP call at 1:13. We push for written incident report." Tiffany twirled noodles. "Also request new seasoning. School justice tastes bland." Grant sipped milk. "He'll try me next," he said. I nodded. "And you'll do what?" "Use words," Grant said. "Beat. At first." Dana slid her notebook to me. "We don't bark. We document." Tiffany smirked. "We can multitask." I raised my glass. "To quiet plans and loud receipts." "Clink," Tiffany said, clinking everyone's glass herself. "Pre-victory ritual." We thought naively that would be the end of it. A stupid kid, a weak school, a bad first day. We were wrong. That slap wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. That night, we got our first official piece of mail from the Oak Meadows HOA. It was in a crisp, cream-colored envelope, slid neatly through our mail slot. It wasn't a welcome basket. It was a photograph of our house with a big red circle around our mailbox. Tucked inside was a notice, a fine for $200. The violation? The font of our house numbers was an unapproved sans serif. Apparently in Oak Meadows, even the number 4 had to have fancy feet. We had 14 days to comply. At the bottom, a signature printed in an arrogant, flowing script. Richard Abernathy, President. They hadn't just drawn a line in the sand. They had drawn it right across our front lawn. They declared war with a lie. I'm a pretty straightforward guy. You punch me, I punch back. Maybe not literally, but the principle stands. You come at me with facts, I'll meet you with facts. But the Abernathys, they didn't deal in facts. Their currency was deception, and their bank was the neighborhood Facebook page. The night after the mailbox fine, our doorbell camera pinged my phone around 11 o'clock. I was in the living room, watching some dumb action movie. Dana was upstairs, probably color-coding a plan to overthrow a small government somewhere. I glanced at the phone. The live feed showed a figure in a hoodie skulking near our porch. It was Chad Abernathy, the prince himself. He was carrying a can of spray paint. He looked left, then right, like a raccoon trying to open a garbage can. He clearly didn't realize that the little black circle on the doorbell was watching his every move. He gave a weak little kick to one of the pumpkins we had out for fall, then sprayed a messy, illegible word on our walkway. He capped the can, gave our door the middle finger, and jogged off into the darkness. He even looked directly into the camera for a solid 3 seconds, his face illuminated by the infrared light. It was the clearest picture of a guilty person I'd ever seen. I saved the clip. I downloaded it to my computer and made 3 backups. I thought, okay, this is it. Game over. I had emailed the video to Richard Abernathy in the morning. What could he say? His son, the bully, was now a vandal, caught in the act. Crystal clear. It was proof. Simple, undeniable proof. I went to bed feeling like the problem was already solved. I should have known better. They rewrote the story. We wrote it back, with receipts. The next morning, before I'd even had my first cup of coffee, Dana called me over to her laptop. Her face was grim. You need to see this, Jim. She had the Oak Meadows HOA community forum pulled up. It was a private Facebook group run by none other than Karen Abernathy, Richard's wife and Chad's mother. There was a new post from her, pinned to the top of the page. It had over 100 reactions already, mostly the angry red emoji face. The post was a long, sanctimonious rant about new families who don't respect community values. It talked about vandalism and the troubling behavior of some of the neighborhood's youth. And attached to the post was a video from a neighbor's porch cam across the street. My heart sank. I watched it. The clip was short, maybe 10 seconds long. It was grainy, deliberately low quality. It showed the freshly painted graffiti on our walkway. Then it cut to a shot of Tiffany from earlier that day, walking up the same path after school. The way they edited it, cutting right as she stepped toward the door, made it look like she was the one admiring her handiwork. They spliced a neighbor's clip of Tiffany walking home with our sprayed walkway, cropping out Chad entirely, a blatant lie. They were framing a 16-year-old girl to protect her attacker. The comments section was a cesspool. Unbelievable, wrote one neighbor. They need to be held accountable, wrote another. I knew they were trouble the day they moved in, someone else chimed in. People who had smiled and waved at us a few days ago were now calling for our heads. Karen Abernathy was in the comments, fanning the flames. We are addressing this with the family directly, she wrote, playing the part of the concerned, responsible administrator. The safety and beauty of our community is our top priority. I felt a rage so pure it was almost cold. This wasn't a schoolyard spat anymore. This was a coordinated, malicious attack on my family by a group of people who held all the cards. They ran the board. They controlled the narrative online. They had the power. We just had the truth, a file on my computer that, at that moment, felt completely worthless. What do we do? I asked Dana. She didn't look up from the screen. She was already working. Her fingers were flying across the keyboard. First, she said, her voice steady as a rock, we document everything. I'm archiving the entire Facebook page, every post, every comment, every like. I'm saving the original video file from the doorbell with its embedded, unalterable timestamp. I'm saving the doctored video they posted, and I'm running a metadata analysis to prove the file was edited. She looked at me. They think a lie travels faster than the truth. That's only the case if the truth is standing still. She was right. This wasn't a street fight. This was a battle of documentation, a war of paper trails. And they had no idea that the quiet, organized woman who made killer lasagna was also a meticulous, unforgiving planner who never, ever lost a receipt. They had posted their lie for the whole world to see. They thought they had cornered us. They didn't know my wife. They didn't know that every lie they told was just another piece of evidence she was adding to a file that was getting thicker by the minute. They had declared war on the wrong family. The petty war started the day the fines began to multiply. It was clear the Abernathy's strategy was to bleed us dry, to annoy us into submission. After the doctored video, the violation notices became a daily occurrence. One day, it was a fine for our grass being a quarter-inch too high. The next, a fine for it being too green, suggesting unapproved chemical fertilizers. They couldn't even keep their own bogus complaints consistent. The fines were delivered not by mail, but by a smirking HOA board member who would tape the notice to our front door with thick packing tape that peeled the paint off. I opened the door mid-tape. Todd froze mid-tape. "Afternoon," I said. "You missed a spot." He swallowed. "Just following procedure." "You're on camera," Dana said, steady. "Per bylaw, 3.4a, use the mailbox." Todd slid the paper into the box like it burned him. "Thank you," Tiffany called. "We'll rate this delivery 5 beige stars." It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. My first instinct was to fight them head on, to lawyer up. But Dana stopped me. "That's what they want," she said, pointing to a clause in the HOA bylaws. "Any legal dispute must go through their approved arbitration, which we have to pay for. It's a trap." So, we weren't going to fight them on their turf. We were going to fight them on ours, with pettiness, glorious, soul-satisfying pettiness. First front, the mailbox. I found a legal serif so curly it looked like a spider did calligraphy, hideous and compliant, perfect. Next was the welcome mat. We'd received a violation notice that our simple, friendly mat that said welcome was excessively conspicuous. I couldn't believe that was a real sentence. So I went online and ordered a new one. This one was plain black with simple white letters. It said, "Oh no, not you again." Not welcoming by any definition. Checkmate. My favorite, the door. Every tape notice ripped paint. Every patch got a perfect square of HOA approved beige. By week 2, our green door wore beige polka dots, a monument to their harassment. It drove Richard Abernathy insane. I'd see him drive by our house, slowing down to glare at the door, his face turning a lovely shade of purple. It was the small victories that kept us going. One night, I called my wife's Uncle Mitch. He's a retired plumber from Queens who thinks the solution to every problem involves either a bigger wrench or a complete disregard for authority. I told him about our petty war. He cackled. "Jimbo, you're thinking too small," he said. "You got a fine for a garden gnome? Go buy 100 of them, a whole gnome army. Put them in formation on your lawn. Make one of them the general. Then when they fine you, tell them you've declared your lawn the sovereign nation of gnome land and they're violating international treaties." I told him I appreciated the advice, but I didn't want to get into a land war in my own front yard. "Suit yourself," he said. "But when you're ready to escalate, I got a guy who can get you a flock of plastic flamingos, no questions asked." The kids even got in on it. Tiffany started a new hobby, photography. She'd sit on the front porch with a long lens camera and take pictures of the board members who delivered the fines. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, snapping photos, the click, click, click of the shutter following them as they scurried back to their cars. One of them, a nervous little man named Todd, started leaving the notices in the mailbox, which was, ironically, the proper procedure. Even Quiet Grant found his own way to contribute. "Do fines come with stickers?" Tiffany asked. "I want the glitter pack." He noticed the HOA landscapers always skip the small patch of grass on the curb in front of our house. So he started cutting it himself. With a pair of scissors. He'd spend an hour out there every Saturday, meticulously trimming each blade of grass to the perfect HOA mandated height. It was the most beautifully manicured 20 square feet in the entire state. The petty war was absurd. It was juvenile, but it was also necessary. It was our way of shouting back without saying a word. It showed the Abernathys and their cronies that we weren't going to break. We weren't going to run. They could tape notices to our door until the sun burned out, and all they would get in return was another beige square. It was a silly, ridiculous stalemate. But we knew it couldn't last forever. They were bullies, and the one thing bullies can't stand is being laughed at. Their escalation was coming, and it was going to be aimed at the one person they misjudged the most. The constant low-grade harassment from the HOA was like a rock in our shoe. It was a persistent annoyance designed to wear us down. I could handle it. Dana could document it. Tiffany could mock it. But I worried about Grant. He's a quiet kid. He internalizes things. I'd see him at the dinner table, listening to the latest update on our beige-spotted door, his jaw tight. Grant is a wrestler. His world is one of rules, discipline, and respect. You face your opponent, you follow the code, you win or you lose, you shake hands. He doesn't understand ambushes and cheap shots. He hates bullies with a quiet, burning intensity. The Abernathys, with their anonymous notices and online lies, were everything he despised. He felt powerless, and he hated that feeling. The breaking point came about a month into our war of attrition. Chad Abernathy, whose suspension for slapping Tiffany had recently ended, was feeling bold. His parents were waging a public campaign against our family, and he clearly thought that gave him a license to do the same. He decided to confront Grant. It was a stupid, predictable move. He chose his ground poorly, the hallway outside the gym, right after wrestling practice. Grant was on his home turf. Chad wasn't alone. He had his two usual shadows with him, a couple of kids who seemed to function as his laugh track. They blocked the narrow hallway as Grant came out of the locker room, his gym bag slung over his shoulder. I got the story later from Grant, and it was confirmed by a dozen other students and, most importantly, a security camera perched high on the wall. Chad stepped forward, trying to look tough. "Bowman," he sneered. "My dad says your family are a bunch of losers who can't follow the rules. He's gonna run you out of town." Grant just stood there. He didn't rise to the bait. He looked at Chad, then at his two friends, then back at Chad. "Get out of my way, Abernathy," he said, his voice low and even. Chad laughed. It was a forced, ugly sound. "Make me." He gave Grant a hard shove in the chest. Grant stumbled back a step, but caught his balance. He didn't shove back. He just planted his feet. This, right here, is the core of who my son is. He will never, ever throw the first punch. But he will always finish the fight. "I'm not going to tell you again," Grant said. "Walk away." Chad saw this as weakness. He saw the lack of aggression as fear. He balled up his fist and took a wild, clumsy swing at Grant's head. It was the last mistake he'd make that day. Chad swung. Grant dipped under like water sliding past a rock. "Whoa," one crony breathed. Grant hooked the legs, guided him down, clean and quiet. Pinned, Chad thrashed. "Get off me!" Grant's voice was calm. "You threw it." "I caught it. We're done." "You're dead," Chad spat, face red. Grant leaned closer. "No, you're loud." "There's a difference." The crony lifted his phone. "Dude, this is live." Grant released, stood, offered a hand, then didn't wait for it to be taken. As he walked away, the wrestling coach rounded the corner, eyes wide. "Problem?" Coach asked. Grant shrugged. He tripped on bad decisions. The coach looked at Chad sobbing on the tiles, then at the camera. "Nurse's office. Now." Replay, level change, clean double leg, controlled descent. Wrestling 101, technique, not muscle. He leaned down, his face close to Chad's. I asked him later what he said. He told me it was simple. He whispered, "It's over. We're done. Don't you ever come near me or my sister again. Do you understand?" Humiliation washed over Chad's face. He was trapped. He was beaten. And he hadn't even been hit. In the middle of the crowded school hallway, in front of his friends and a dozen other students, Chad Abernathy started to cry. Not a few quiet tears. He started to sob, loud and messy and pathetic. Grant held the pin for another second, making sure the message was received. Then he stood up, picked up his gym bag, and walked away without a backward glance. The school called, of course. But this time, the story was different. The camera footage was undeniable. The witness statements were all consistent. Chad Abernathy had initiated the confrontation, thrown the first and only punch, and Grant had simply defended himself using the skills he had been trained to use. Chad got another suspension, this one for a week. He lost student council eligibility and team privileges the rest of the semester. Grant got a talking to about not handling things himself, but there was no formal punishment. It was a clear victory. But as we sat at the dinner table that night, a sense of unease settled over me. We had won the battle in the cafeteria. We had won the battle in the hallway. But Richard Abernathy was not a man who took public defeat well, especially when it involved the humiliation of his son. The petty fines stopped coming. The nasty Facebook posts disappeared. An eerie silence fell over our neighborhood, and that was far more terrifying than any violation notice. The silence lasted for exactly 8 days. I know because I counted. 8 days of no fines, no passive-aggressive comments on the HOA forum, no slow drive-bys from Richard Abernathy. It was the calm before the storm. Then the certified letter arrived. It required a signature. My hand was shaking slightly as I signed the mail carrier's little electronic pad. I had a bad feeling about this. The envelope was thick, embossed with the Oak Meadows HOA logo. Inside, there was no friendly newsletter. It was a single sheet of paper with a lot of dense, legal-sounding text. It was a notice for a special assessment. According to the letter, a recent inspection had revealed critical structural deficiencies in the community clubhouse roof. The repairs were deemed an emergency and required immediate action. Initial memo said $300,000 split 100 ways, $3,000 each. Then the emergency revision jumped to $1 million, now $10,000 per home. A typo, surely. I kept reading. The board had apparently received a last-minute, highly competitive bid from a contractor, which was significantly higher than initial estimates. The vote to approve it had been unanimous. The payment was due in full in 30 days. Failure to pay would result in a lien being placed on our property, followed by foreclosure proceedings. No 14-day notice. The emergency vote happened in a closed session. The winning contractor, a Vance affiliate in a different LLC wrapper, $10,000, 30 days. It was a financial nuclear bomb. There was no way we could pull that kind of money together on such short notice. This wasn't a fine for a welcome mat. This was a direct, calculated attack designed to break us. This was how they were going to force us out. I felt a surge of despair, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, hard certainty. We could not be the first family this had happened to. This was too slick, too well orchestrated. This was a system, and if it was a system, there had to be a paper trail. The next Saturday, I told Dana I was going to run some errands. Instead, I drove to the county records office. It's an old, dusty building downtown that smells like old paper and quiet desperation. I spent 6 hours there, pulling property deeds for every house in the Oak Meadows subdivision for the past 5 years. I paid for photocopies of every single one. I came home with a box full of documents. Dana didn't ask any questions. She just cleared the dining room table. For the next 2 days, our house became a war room. Dana, the spreadsheet queen, built a master file tracking every property, its sale history, sale price, and the names of the buyers and sellers. Tiffany, who was a visual thinker, commandeered a huge corkboard from my office. She printed out a satellite map of our neighborhood and pinned it to the board. Our mission was to find the pattern. We cross-referenced the property records with old HOA newsletters we found online and screenshots from the community Facebook group. Slowly, painfully, a narrative began to emerge. It was always the same story. A family, often new to the neighborhood, would suddenly find themselves buried in a flurry of violation notices. Fines for landscaping, for trash cans left out an hour too long, for the wrong shade of white on their window trim. Then, after a few months of this harassment, the hammer would drop. A massive, unexpected special assessment. The family would try to fight it. They'd complain at board meetings. But the board, controlled by Richard Abernathy and his cronies, would shut them down. Drowning in fines and facing a huge, impossible bill, they'd become desperate. And then, like a vulture circling its prey, a cash offer would appear. It was always unsolicited. It was always from the same mysterious LLC, a company with a generic name, Vance Development. The offer would be low, well below market value. But it was a lifeline. It was a way out from under the crushing weight of the HOA's tyranny. The families, exhausted, demoralized, and financially broken, would take the deal. They'd sign the papers, pack their bags, and disappear. Tiffany took a box of red map pins. Every time we confirmed a sale to Vance Development under these circumstances, she would push a pin into the map on the corkboard. The first few pins seemed random, but as our research deepened, a chilling picture took shape. The red pins weren't scattered. They were forming a line, a clear, unmistakable corridor of properties stretching from the main entrance of the subdivision, straight through the neighborhood, and ending at the shores of the community lake. They weren't just buying houses, they were buying a path. My hands were trembling as I did one last online search. Arthur Vance, the owner of Vance Development. The search results brought up dozens of articles from business journals, and then I saw it. A photo from a local charity golf tournament. Two men, standing arm in arm, smiling for the camera, holding a giant check. On the left was Richard Abernathy. On the right was Arthur Vance. The caption underneath read, "Longtime friends and business partners. Richard Abernathy and Arthur Vance celebrate another successful fundraiser." We weren't just fighting our HOA president. We were fighting a criminal conspiracy, a systematic predatory scheme to bully people out of their homes for profit. They were using the HOA as their weapon to steal millions of dollars in real estate. Our $10,000 assessment wasn't a fine, it was an eviction notice. And we decided right then and there that we weren't just going to defy it, we were going to use it to set a trap. The plan was terrifyingly simple. To catch the sharks, we had to pretend to be bleeding. We had to look like beaten, desperate prey. Our entire family had to give the performance of our lives. The first step was to signal our surrender. I sat down and composed the most carefully worded email of my life. I sent it to the entire HOA board, making sure Richard Abernathy was the first name on the list. I complained weekly about the $10,000 assessment. I wrote about the financial strain, the unfairness of it all. I didn't threaten legal action. I didn't sound defiant. I sounded defeated. I ended the email with a single, crucial sentence. "With all these fines and now this, we're not sure we can afford to live here anymore." I hit send, and the bait was in the water. We didn't have to wait long. Less than 48 hours later, an email popped into my inbox. The subject line was, "Regarding your property in Oak Meadows." The sender was arthur.vance at vancedevelopment.com. He wrote that he had heard through a mutual acquaintance. He didn't mention Richard by name, of course. That we were experiencing some challenges with the HOA and might be considering a move. He offered a discreet, no-obligation conversation about a possible quick cash sale of our home. It was happening, exactly as we had predicted. From that moment on, Dana took over all communications. She was born for this role. She called him back, and with me listening in on speakerphone, she played the part of the distraught, overwhelmed wife. Her voice trembled just enough. She sounded reluctant but resigned. She was a master. One-party consent, every call recorded. At home, posted audio/video notice covered us, and a mobile notary witnessed the cash receipt. Vance was slick. He oozed a kind of predatory sympathy. "I know Richard can be a real stickler for the rules," he said in one call, his voice smooth as oil. "He's just passionate about property values. But sometimes it's just easier to find a place that's a better fit, you know?" He was positioning himself as the savior, the white knight offering us a clean escape from the dragon. Dana skillfully guided the conversation, getting him to admit, without admitting it, that he had a direct line to Richard and was aware of the HOA's pressure tactics. After a week of back and forth, they agreed on a price. As expected, it was a lowball offer, about 20% below what our house was actually worth. But we accepted it. We agreed to have him come to our house to sign the initial purchase agreement. At our dining table, he counted our deposit, signed a receipt, and left with the briefcase. The arrogance was breathtaking. He wasn't just buying our house, he was rubbing our noses in it. This was the heart of our trap. The day before the meeting, I withdrew $10,000 in hundreds. Dana photographed every serial number and added tiny UV initials on each bill. Marked money. Ours. He accepted the offer to hold the deposit overnight. Said it showed commitment. They were traceable. They were evidence. We were no longer just victims defending our home. We were now citizen investigators, building a criminal case for fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. Arthur Vance thought he was coming to our house to close a deal. He thought he was about to sign a contract to steal our home. He had no idea he was the star of our show, about to walk onto a stage where every word would be recorded and every dollar bill would be a nail in his coffin. The day Arthur Vance came to our house, the air was thick with tension. Our home, usually a place of chaotic comfort, felt like a movie set. And, in a way, it was. Dana had orchestrated everything with the precision of a military operation. She had spent the previous evening setting up the surveillance. We had 3 tiny cameras, the kind that looked like a screw head, hidden in the dining room. One was tucked into the spine of a book on the bookshelf. Another was nestled in the leaves of a fake fiddle leaf fig tree in the corner. The main camera, the one that would capture the whole scene in glorious 4K, was ingeniously hidden inside the frame of our digital photo display, which sat on the buffet, cycling through happy family pictures. A perfect ironic backdrop for the crime that was about to be committed. But the audio was the real masterpiece. A few months earlier, Dana had bought a fancy high-end coffee machine that came with a set of sleek stainless steel thermal travel cups. I had grumbled about the expense at the time. I now understood it was an investment. She had taken one of the cups to a specialty electronics store and had it professionally modified. Embedded in the thick base of the cup, completely invisible, was a broadcast-quality microphone with a wireless transmitter. It looked and felt like a normal coffee cup. It was our Trojan horse. To him, it was just coffee. To us, it was a mic with a timestamp. Vance arrived precisely at 2 o'clock. Slick suit, mirror-shine shoes, shark smile, polish overwrought. He carried a slim leather briefcase, the same case he'd walked out of our dining room with the night before. I met him at the door, playing my part as the gruff, defeated homeowner. I shook his hand limply. I didn't make eye contact. I mumbled something about my wife handling the details. I led him to the dining room table, where the purchase agreement sat waiting. Dana entered from the kitchen, the perfect picture of a stressed but gracious hostess. "Mr. Vance, can I get you something to drink? Coffee?" He accepted, of course. People like him always accept the offer. It's a power move, making you serve them in your own home. Dana returned with 2 cups of coffee, placing the special bugged cup directly in front of him. The trap was set. We sat down. Vance launched into his spiel, explaining the contract in condescendingly simple terms. Dana let him talk, nodding along, her face a mask of anxious concentration. Then she began. She started asking questions, her voice laced with a beautifully crafted performance of worry and confusion. "It's just, this all happened so fast," she said, her eyes wide. "That special assessment from Richard and the board. It was just so much money. We never saw it coming." Vance took the bait. He leaned back in his chair, getting comfortable. He thought he was dealing with a couple of beaten-down suburbanites. He thought he had all the power. And when people think they have all the power, they get careless. They start to brag. "Look," he said, leaning forward and lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Between us, Richard runs a tight ship for a reason. He has a vision for this community. We have a vision. And part of that vision involves upgrading. We're clearing out the inflexible residents, the ones who don't want to get with the program. It's for the good of everyone's property values." His eyes gleamed. He was proud of this. Dana pressed gently. "So, the fines and the big assessment, that's part of the plan? With Richard? To get people to sell their homes to you?" It was the million-dollar question. I held my breath. Vance picked up the coffee cup. He took a long, slow sip. The microphone was probably inches from his mouth. He placed the cup back down on the saucer with a soft clink. He smiled that cold, dead smile. "Let's just say Richard and I have a mutually beneficial arrangement," he said, the words clear as a bell. "He keeps the neighborhood standards high, and I provide a simple, cash-based solution for people who find those standards too difficult to maintain. It's clean. It's business," he had just confessed. On high-definition video and broadcast-quality audio, he had admitted to a criminal conspiracy to use the HOA as a weapon for his own financial gain. He picked up his pen to sign the contract. He had no idea he had just signed his own confession. We had him. The fish was on the hook. Now all we had to do was reel him in and show the whole world what we had caught. The house went quiet in layers. Dryer hum, fridge click, then nothing. Dana set the UV pen down. "If this goes sideways, we pull the plug." I nodded, then didn't. If it goes sideways, we push harder. She studied me. You're scared. Of losing the roof, I said. Of teaching the kids that bullies win. Dana took my hand. We teach them that grown-ups don't scare easy. From the hallway, Tiffany whispered, also we teach them to label their cords because I almost unplugged the main camera. We laughed too loud, then quiet again. Tomorrow, Dana said, pocketing the recorder. Truth gets loud. The Oak Meadows annual homeowners meeting was Richard Abernathy's coronation. It was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile room with beige walls and uncomfortable folding chairs. This was his turf. He stood at a podium at the front of the room, a smug little king surveying his domain. Karen, his wife, sat beside him, controlling a PowerPoint presentation filled with meaningless pie charts about lawn maintenance. Arthur Vance, the guest of honor, sat in the front row, looking smooth and confident. He'd occasionally catch my eye and give me a little nod, a conspirator's wink, as if we were now partners in his grand vision. He had no idea what was coming. The room hummed, old HVAC, chair squeaks, board coughs. Perfect cover. The meeting was a masterclass in bureaucratic boredom. Abernathy droned on about budget surpluses and the successful implementation of the new mailbox font initiative. He was deliberately trying to lull the 70 or so residents in attendance into a stupor. Finally, after nearly an hour, he reached the end of his agenda. That concludes the scheduled items, he announced. Is there any new business? That was our cue. Dana stood up. Her movement was so calm and deliberate that it cut through the sleepy atmosphere in the room. I have some new business to discuss, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm, and it carried to every corner of the room. Every head turned to look at her. Richard Abernathy looked annoyed. Dana, this is for pre-approved topics only. If you have a grievance, you need to submit it in writing to the board. I think this is something everyone here will want to see, she replied, her eyes locked on his. Before he could respond, our plan kicked into high gear. I was already moving. I walked briskly to the front of the room, carrying my laptop. Tiffany, who had been lingering near the back, unzipped a duffel bag and pulled out a powerful portable speaker, plugging it into the wall. Karen Abernathy jumped up. You can't do that! This is private property! I ignored her. I unplugged her laptop from the projector and plugged mine in. The HDMI was already live for the budget slides. I only swapped inputs. I didn't say a word. I just gave her a flat, cold stare. I don't bluff. The first image that flashed up on the big screen behind the podium was a crystal-clear, time-stamped still frame from our doorbell camera. It was a perfect shot of Chad Abernathy's face as he spray-painted our walkway. A collective gasp went through the room. I hit the space bar. The full, unedited video began to play, silent but damning. The whole room watched as the HOA president's son committed a crime. Then, I let the video play a second time, but now with audio from Tiffany's speaker. It was a recording of Karen Abernathy's voice, taken from the live she posted on Facebook, played over the footage of her son. Her voice, talking about troubling behavior, echoed through the room as everyone watched Chad vandalize our home. Her face went the color of milk. From the front row, Karen Abernathy stood, voice sharp. This is stolen footage. Dana didn't blink. It's ours. Time-stamped. And this, she tapped the second window, is your post, Karen. Karen snapped. I posted what parents needed to hear. And you cut out your son committing the crime, Dana said. Play the untouched angle. Murmurs rolled like thunder. Mr. Henderson jabbed a finger toward the stage. That man fined me after his crew broke my sprinkler. Maria lifted her phone. And Todd peeled my sticker. Here's the tow. Richard banged his gavel. Order! Tiffany cupped her hands. Order up! Laughter broke the room's fear. I stepped beside the podium. Short version, they fine you, then their friend buys you low. Long version, I pointed to the screen. Play. We ran the montage. Gasps. A chair scraped hard. A teen in the back said, Wait, so we weren't crazy? No, Dana said. You were isolated. Karen hissed, Richard, do something. He lifted the gavel again, then lowered it, slow, like it weighed 100 pounds. The dam had broken. An older man in the third row, Mr. Henderson, stood up. I think I know what's going on here, he said, his voice trembling with anger. I have something to add. He pulled out his phone and in a few seconds, a new video file popped up on my laptop. I clicked play. The screen now showed security footage from his house. It showed a man in the uniform of the HOA's landscaping company deliberately snapping the head off one of Mr. Henderson's sprinklers. The next slide was a photo of the $300 fine he received 2 days later for having a parched and unkempt lawn. A woman in the back stood up. Her name was Maria. She showed a video from her car's dash cam. It clearly showed a board member, that same nervous man, Todd, walking by her parked car late at night and peeling the corner of her registration sticker off the windshield. 2 days later, her car was towed from her own driveway for improper registration display. It was an avalanche. One after another, people stood up. A dozen families, all with their own stories, their own little pieces of proof, videos of petty harassment, recordings of threatening phone calls. A mountain of evidence, all pointing to a systematic campaign of abuse orchestrated by the man holding the gavel. The room, once sleepy and compliant, was now a tinderbox of outrage, silence, one breath. "Last clip," I said, on screen, a waveform and timestamp. Vance's voice pours from our coffee cup mic. The power had shifted. Richard Abernathy's kingdom was burning down around him, and all he could do was stand there and watch. But the architect of it all, Arthur Vance, was a different animal. He wasn't a petty tyrant, he was a predator. And he wasn't going to let his multi-million-dollar scheme collapse without a fight. He thought he had one last move. He thought he could buy his way out. The clubhouse was in chaos. People were shouting, comparing stories, waving printouts of bogus fines in the air. Richard Abernathy was frantically banging his gavel, but the sound was completely lost in the roar of a neighborhood that had finally woken up. He had lost control. Arthur Vance, however, was eerily calm. He saw the situation not as a disaster, but as a negotiation that had just gotten more expensive. He pushed through the crowd and got right in my face. His slick smile was gone, replaced by a tight, predatory glare. "Okay, Bowman," he hissed, his voice low and urgent so only I could hear. "You've made your point. Now, what's it going to take to make this go away? Name your price. I'll write you a check right now. A big one. Just get up there and tell everyone this has been a huge misunderstanding. He was trying to bribe me, right there, in a room full of his victims." The arrogance was stunning. He actually believed that money was a magic wand that could erase everything. But I was ready for this. Dana and I had predicted he would try to buy our silence. That's why I was wearing a jacket, even though the room was hot. Tucked into the inside pocket was my phone, recording audio. Pinned to my lapel was a tiny camera, the kind reporters use, capturing a perfect view of his face. "A check isn't going to work, Vance," I said, my voice just loud enough for the microphone to pick it up clearly. I paused, letting him think. Then I added, "But I might be interested in that cash deposit you brought to my house. The one you have in your briefcase." A flicker of relief crossed his face. He thought he'd found my price. He thought I was just another greedy chump he could buy off. "All right," he said, a hint of his smug smile returning. "I like a man who deals in cash. Follow me outside. We'll settle this." He turned and strode toward the exit, expecting me to follow like a dog. I did. Dana was right behind me, her own phone up, openly recording as we stepped out into the cool evening air. Vance walked over to the manicured flower bed near the entrance, a ridiculous location for a criminal transaction. He clicked open his expensive leather briefcase. Inside, neat stacks of hundreds, our deposit, same band, same serials. "This 10,000 is yours," he said, pulling out the cash. "And there's 50 more coming tomorrow. All you have to do is go back inside, say you were mistaken, and this all goes away." He tried to shove the stack of money into my hand. I kept my hands at my sides. "You're paying me to lie to my neighbors. I'm paying you to be smart," Vance said. "Take the win." Dana's phone camera purred. "Define win, Mr. Vance." He flicked his eyes to her. "Happy families, quiet streets, no drama." "Translation," I said. "Silence." "Exactly." He lifted the stack higher. 10 now, 50 tomorrow. A soft blue glow swept the bills, Dana's UV light. The initials popped like stars. "Same cash," I said. "Same serials." Vance blinked. "What is this?" "Receipts," Dana said. The patrol car door opened behind us. The officer's voice was cool. "Keep your hands where we can see them." Vance's smile curdled. "You people don't understand how this works." "Oh," I said as the cuffs clicked. "We do." "That's why it's working." I didn't take it. I didn't even look at it. I looked past him, into the parking lot. "I don't think it's going away, Arthur," I said. Just then, two figures stepped out of the shadows from behind a large SUV. They weren't angry homeowners. They were police officers in uniform. An hour earlier, I briefed a fraud detective and flagged the marked serials. He staged nearby, waiting for probable cause. A public cash bribe on camera was enough. One of the officers, a tall, no-nonsense woman, walked toward us. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice calm but full of authority. "I think you and I need to have a conversation about bribery and extortion." "Bribery, conspiracy, evidence tampering," she added. "All on tape." Vance froze. His head snapped from the officers, to the money in his hand, to my face. The smug confidence drained away, replaced by pure, undiluted panic. He finally understood. It had all been a trap. As the second officer was putting him in handcuffs, the clubhouse doors burst open. Chad Abernathy came running out, his face red and blotchy with tears and rage. He was probably coming to his father's defense. He screamed something incoherent and lunged toward me, but in his haste, he didn't see the sprinkler head he was about to step on. His foot slipped on the wet grass. He went down in a clumsy, flailing heap, landing right at the feet of the police officers. And for the second and hopefully final time in his young life, he started to ugly cry, his sobs echoing across the parking lot. Same sound as the gym floor, different lesson. It was a pathetic end to a pathetic little dynasty. The police went back inside. A few minutes later, they emerged with Richard and Karen Abernathy in tow. The crowd of homeowners gathered at the doors, watching in stunned silence as the architects of their misery were led away in police cars. We had done it. We had won. But as I stood there, watching the red and blue lights disappear down the street, I knew the fight wasn't completely over. They were gone, but the corrupt system they had built was still standing. And we had to tear it down, brick by brick. The arrests were the lead story on the local news that night. Our quiet little subdivision was suddenly famous, a case study in HOA corruption. The fallout was swift and brutal. Arthur Vance and Richard Abernathy were charged with a laundry list of crimes: fraud, conspiracy, extortion. Karen Abernathy was charged with evidence tampering for the fake video. She pled to evidence tampering and cyber harassment. 2 years probation, 600 hours of community service, restitution for legal costs, and a 10-year ban from any HOA board or moderation privileges on community pages. She also issued a written, public apology to Tiffany and paid our defamation and monitoring costs. Faced with the mountain of evidence we had collected, the recordings, the marked bills, the testimony from a dozen other families, they all took plea deals. They avoided long prison sentences, but their lives were ruined. Vance Development collapsed into bankruptcy, and the court-appointed receiver began the long process of liquidating its assets to pay back the families who had been forced out. A receiver clawed back equity gaps on a rolling basis. Lowball deltas refunded plus fees, first in, first out. But for us, for me and Dana and the kids, it was never just about revenge. We didn't want to just punish the guilty. We wanted to fix the system that allowed them to get away with it for so long. Proof beats power when you show it. We showed it. Now the rules make it easy for the next family. Dana, using her uncanny ability to organize chaos, spearheaded the effort. She called an emergency meeting of the Oak Meadows homeowners. The clubhouse, once the site of our showdown, was now the birthplace of our community's renewal. The first order of business was simple. We held a vote of no confidence in the entire remaining HOA board. Every one of Abernathy's cronies was voted out, unanimously. We needed a new board, one made of people who understood what had happened. Mr. Henderson, the man with the broken sprinkler, was elected the new president. Maria, the woman whose car was almost towed, became the treasurer. They asked me if I wanted a position. I politely declined. I'm not a politician. I'm the guy you call when the pipes burst. I fix the problem, and then I go back to my own life. I did, however, agree to chair a temporary committee to rewrite the HOA bylaws from the ground up. For a month, we worked. We ripped out every vague, ambiguous rule that Abernathy had used as a weapon. We installed ironclad protections for homeowners. We put strict term limits on all board positions, so no one could ever build a personal fiefdom again. We made it mandatory that any violation notice must include clear, photographic evidence with a timestamp. We created a simple, independent appeals process that didn't require hiring a lawyer. An elected 3-member ethics panel now reviews every citation before any fine is issued. We passed a new rule requiring that any special assessment over $500 had to be approved by a vote of the entire community, not just the board. We made the HOA transparent. We made it accountable. We made it fair. Slowly, life in Oak Meadows began to return to normal, but it was a new, better normal. The cloud of fear and intimidation that had hung over the neighborhood was gone, replaced by a sense of shared ownership and community. People started talking to each other again. The community fund we established with money from the Vance lawsuit helped 3 of the displaced families buy back their old homes. It was a powerful, beautiful thing to see. Our family found its rhythm again. Grant became a quiet legend at his wrestling meets, the kid who could win a fight without throwing a punch. Tiffany took her sharp wit and used it to become the star of the high school debate club, where she now dismantles arguments instead of bullies. Dana went back to her timelines and project plans, but now they were for family vacations and home improvement projects, not for building a legal case. And me, I'm still Jim Bowman. I still like my coffee black and my life quiet. Our front door is back to its original forest green, no beige spots in sight. But I kept the welcome mat, the one that says, "Oh no, not you again." Dana thinks it's tacky, but she lets me keep it, because it's a reminder. It's a reminder that your home is worth fighting for, that sometimes, to protect your peace, you have to go to war. We proved that a handful of ordinary people, armed with the truth and a stubborn refusal to back down, can be more powerful than any bully on a board. We kept our house. They lost their kingdom, and our little patch of grass was finally truly our